Hi again, and welcome back to the Engle Show. It's been a while since I've been able to share a show with you, and I hope that you can view this with no problem on the Appalachian Channel Roku app or on YouTube. I'd like to talk about something today that I've actually talked about before, but this is a subject that you can't really talk about enough, and that is, unfortunately, Senator Joe Manchin, right? In West Virginia, we're working very hard to pressure Joe Manchin to do the right things on democracy reforms, on climate action, especially the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill that Congress is trying to piece together in the climate action portions of it. I just was on a Zoom call today with a couple of activists from California, including one gentleman who was a Vietnam War activist and has been involved in the environmental movement for over 50 years. And I can say that I deeply appreciate that gentleman and appreciate the lady who was on with him, who initially contacted me from that organization in California. And we have a lot of organizations across the country, even internationally, contacting people like myself who are activists and organizers and mobilizers in the state of West Virginia, asking this same question: what can we do to move Joe Manchin? What can we do about Joe Manchin? What are we going to do to make sure that he does this, this, and this, and that he doesn't do that, this, and that, right? And we in West Virginia, we totally understand your concern, because Joe Manchin's position of power right now in the U.S. Senate as the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee chairman and as the critical 50th swing vote in the ultra slim Democratic majority is an indeed powerful position. A lot of people are even saying that the Joe who is in power in Washington is not Joe Biden, it's Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin, as an extremely egotistical person, is loving that, no doubt. He's just eating it up right now, that he has so much power and control and influence in Washington, D.C. I can tell you that I just want to reassure all of you who have these questions and concerns, we are fighting in West Virginia to get this guy to do the right thing, to abolish that filibuster or change the rules regarding the filibuster and give us critical democracy reforms, absolutely critical climate action legislation, at least as part of the reconciliation bill, if not things that we really support, like the Thrive Act, the Do No Harm Act, the Equality Act, the PRO Act, all of these different extremely crucial pieces of legislation being considered by Congress right now. We are trying so hard to get him to do the right thing. We are applying the public pressure, right? And the message that we have been sending him and that we want to send the country and the world is that we're at a critical juncture. The Republican Party is in 100% unanimous opposition against taking any form of meaningful climate action, against any form of important democracy reform. At the state level, Republicans are the reason we need these democracy reforms, right? They're passing legislation to suppress the vote as much and as often as they can, especially amongst traditionally Democratic Party constituencies. They're a threat to American democracy. And Joe Manchin is using bipartisanship, quote unquote, as an excuse not to do it, as an excuse not to touch the filibuster and allow Republicans to abuse it to no end in the Senate, to put a screeching halt to everything, which is what Mitch McConnell is known for. Whether he's minority leader or majority leader in the Senate, he puts a screeching halt to all of the important legislation that we desperately need Congress to pass and Joe Biden to sign at the White House. We are trying and trying and trying and trying and trying in West Virginia to get Joe Manchin to make those critical reforms to the filibuster or abolish it altogether and pass these critical pieces of legislation. We are doing just about everything you can imagine. We are, we put up TV and radio spots, billboards, letters to the editor and op-eds and columns in statewide newspapers. We are calling and writing and pressuring the people at his offices every day, all day long, Thousands of us are. We are signing petitions and sending them to him. We are trying in COVID-safe ways to go out publicly, like with the Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign in Charleston, to move Manchin. We are doing everything we possibly can in conjunction with national and international partners to apply the pressure to this man. And as the activist I mentioned earlier, the Vietnam War and environmental activist I mentioned who I spoke to earlier today, as he said, Saul Alinsky famously said that there were two kinds of mobilizing and organizing and pressure that could be applied: the financial pressure that the wealthy can exert, and then the public pressure that the people can exert. And that it's up to us as members of the public, as people, as citizens, to apply pressure in such a way that the campaign donations and the lobbying don't mean anything, because the popular will is turning against a politician. And when the politician, looks at the political headwinds and the polling and everything, that politician has to decide that regardless of where the campaign finance and lobbying is coming from, he, in this case Joe Manchin, has to be willing and able to do the right thing in conjunction with the political headwinds and what the polls are saying and what the people largely want. Now, I don't know if we're drowning out the voices of your Trump supporters and your far-right Republicans and the authoritarian right that does have a loud voice in the state of West Virginia or not. But I know that we're trying, and I know that we are trying to get through to Manchin with reasonable, rational arguments about climate action from the IPCC's 6th assessment report. We are trying to get him to listen to what the International Energy Agency said in May, that we cannot continue to build out coal, oil, and gas infrastructure and meet our Paris Climate Accord goals. We can't build any more of that. We are trying to make him understand the extreme importance that his extreme position of power in Congress right now holds, and that the actions he takes or doesn't take today, right now, could directly influence in an enormous, outsized way our ability to continue to safely inhabit this planet. It's that serious. That's not exaggeration. That's not hyperbole. We're trying to explain this to this guy every way that we know how. But here's the reality on Joe Manchin, okay? And if you have young kids here watching this program, or you yourself are kind of offended by coarse language, I would advise you to take a precaution here in continuing to watch. But the thing about Joe Manchin is, as Coral Davenport with the New York Times recently reported in a piece that was out yesterday, Manchin has received more in fossil fuels funding from the oil, gas, and coal industries this cycle in campaign money than any other senator in the U.S. Senate, because they recognize his importance. Manchin has a personal relationship, has even swapped cell phone numbers with the CEO of American Electric Power, an electric utility that relies on West Virginia coal quite extensively. Manchin has been buddying and schmoozing around at the Greenbrier Resort, owned by billionaire coal baron Governor Jim Justice from West Virginia, with the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. And the head of the Chamber of Commerce is good friends with Manchin. And there were lots of conversations taking place privately there with the people who could afford to attend and did attend about this budget reconciliation legislation and the climate action necessary. And so those businesses represented by the Chamber of Commerce and the fossil fuels industry and electric utilities like AEP, they have Manchin's ear. They have direct, nonstop access to Joe Manchin that others of us don't. And here's the thing, you may not be aware of this. I think I mentioned it in a previous episode, but Joe Manchin, all right, while Texas Democrats in the Texas state legislature had left the state, right, they left the state to deprive the Republicans in the Texas state legislature of a quorum needed to pass extreme voter suppression legislation. The Texas Democrats left the state to not allow that quorum for the Texas Republicans. They fled to Washington, D.C., looking for help from other Democrats like Joe Manchin in the National Party, begging for passage of democracy reform legislation like the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and D.C. statehood. So while they're up there doing that, Joe Manchin, while these Texas Democrats are in D.C. begging for this help on democracy reform, Joe Manchin flies to Texas to accept fossil fuels money, campaign donations from the Texas fossil fuels industry, while his fellow Democrats from Texas are trying to deprive that state legislature of a quorum to pass this voter suppression, democracy-killing legislation, which they've since passed, and are at risk of being arrested when they return to the state at the time. Joe Manchin flies down there to accept fossil fuels money. Joe Manchin's daughter, Heather, CEO of Mylan Pharmaceuticals, presided over Mylan while there was an over 400% increase in EpiPens that Mylan provided and the costs of EpiPens that Mylan produced. So while people need this life-saving medication for when you have anaphylaxis or an extreme allergic reaction, Heather Heyer's doing extremely well as CEO. Mylan Pharmaceuticals no longer produces pharmaceuticals in West Virginia. Those jobs left West Virginia and are going overseas, while Heather once again makes out extremely well from the demise of those pharmaceutical jobs in West Virginia to produce pharmaceuticals used in the United States. This is the Manchin family. This is who these people are. And so I would tell national activists and international activists who I know are so concerned right now, just like we are in this state, that Manchin, and once again, I warned you about the language content, Manchin does not give a fuck. He just doesn't. The guy just, and I don't know, I honestly don't know. I'm trying everything that I know to try. Thousands of other activists in West Virginia and throughout the central Appalachian region are trying everything that they know to try to make this guy care and to make this guy take the important action that we may not get a second shot at to avert climate disaster, adapt to what we've locked in, pursue critical democracy reforms ahead of the 2022 and 2024 election cycles, and address some of the issues that we saw in the insurrectionist terrorist coup attempt on January 6th by the authoritarian right, address some of the issues that have happened since then because they couldn't succeed in their coup. Donald Trump is talking about running for president again in 2024, so the urgency is certainly there that he will try some of the same tricks and tactics he tried with dozens of lawsuits and pressuring state elections officials to overturn election results, frivolous lawsuits. We know that that's all coming again. We know that in the next two election cycles, Republicans are going to continue to try to push the envelope away from democracy toward authoritarianism. They're going to try in a very fascist way to reject our secular constitutional democratic republic in favor of authoritarian dictatorship with someone like Trump at the head of it. And if it's not Trump, there's any one of numerous followers who will try to be that headlining person. We know it's coming, and yet Joe Manchin does not give a fuck, okay? And trying to persuade him to, we apply that pressure every way we can. We've stroked his ego and thanked him for certain things that he's done. We voted for him because in 2018 because we knew that Patrick Morrisey would be exponentially worse in favor of Republicans. We gave him back the office that he's had, Robert C. Byrd's seat, since 2010. So some of us have voted for him for senator more than once. He controls the Democratic Party apparatus in the state of West Virginia. He and his cousin Belinda Beafor, the state party chairwoman of the Democratic Party, and other Manchin acolytes, they control Democratic Party state politics in West Virginia. They control it. I don't know how much more power and influence and control and wealth that this guy wants. But as we try to speak louder than all of that, we're largely failing. But I do want to reassure you all that we do care, that we are fighting, that we are aware of the great reporting and coverage that's being done daily, showing Manchin, showing who he truly is, showing his ownership stake in the coal industry, how he's made $4.5 million since 2010 through his coal brokerage InterSystems, right? Directly financially benefiting from fossil fuels. we're very much aware of all of this, and we're trying like hell to fight it, folks. We really are. We're here with you. We're in the trenches. We're trying to get this guy to just occasionally, when it's extremely important at least, do the right thing. Okay, and nothing could be more important right now than critical investments in addressing the climate crisis and mitigating the worst and adapting to what we've locked in. Nothing could be more important right now than critical American democracy reforms. We're trying to get this guy to care, but we just don't know what else to do to move that needle. But we're not going to give up in the weeks and months ahead. We are not going to give up. We are going to continue to fight with this guy to try to get him to care and do the right thing, at least every once in a while when it's critically important. We're here, we're in the trenches, we're doing it. Now, in the meantime, long term, what we're focused on is making him irrelevant in 2022. We need to expand the Democrats' majority in the Senate so that he is not a critical swing vote, and hopefully he would lose his committee chairmanship in that scenario and would just become basically irrelevant. We wouldn't need him to pass crucial legislation. There'd be nothing he could do to stop it. And we're hoping between 2022 and 2024 to make him irrelevant. And then come 24, if he runs again, we're certainly hoping to successfully primary him. That's an uphill, difficult challenge. But there is a movement in the state of West Virginia you may or may not be aware of that I know Anthony Underwood on the Appalachian Channel has covered with former gubernatorial candidate Stephen Smith, called the West Virginia Can't Wait movement. And these folks are working very hard and have been since 2018 to build a movement that would strip the Manchinite clan of power and control over the state Democratic Party apparatus, and also at all levels of government and in all conceivable offices from school board to Congress, drive the Manchinites out and drive Manchin himself out, successfully primary him so that whoever takes over his seat in the Senate is not a Republican, not somebody who could potentially be even worse, but someone we can trust and rely upon to truly represent us in West Virginia. So there is a movement working very, very hard day in and day out all over this state to make that difference, to take back the state Democratic Party apparatus and to kind of overthrow the Manchin clan and get rid of Manchin himself. That is an ongoing effort that I myself have been part of, as have thousands of others. So this is a huge, crucial movement. It has been for 2 election cycles now. It'll continue to be in additional election cycles. West Virginia can't wait. If you get a chance, you should look that up. The last thing I'll say is I myself am not a registered Democrat. Okay, I'm registered as nonpartisan. I can choose a Democratic ballot in primaries to vote for certain candidates that may be forced to run Democrat in order to succeed. If I want to, being registered nonpartisan frees me up for that. The only party-like organization that I support, it's not a party, but it's similar, is the Democratic Socialists of America. There is a chapter here in West Virginia. We are trying to back candidates like AOC, who succeeded with support from DSA, in places throughout Appalachia. So, I just want to stress that it's not just all about the Democratic Party for me, all right? I understand that a lot of you who may be viewing this are very concerned about the Democratic Party's stance in this state and throughout the country, but it's not just about that for me. But we're here on the ground fighting from a leftist perspective, no matter what. See you next time.